Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Hi, this is Dane. Sorry, can't get to the phone right.
Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs here with Russ Tanner on GeoEngineering Watch Radio. Thanks for joining us. Another Saturday show, and we're going to be talking about a couple of developments during the week and inviting you to join us if you feel like doing that. I just wanted to point out that the subject, the single subject of geoengineering, which is really the subject of the spraying going on over our heads, is connected to virtually everything else. And the reason I say that is because I'm approaching this from a holistic health point of view. That's where my background is focused. And in investigating the health issues, I see them connected to absolutely everything else in our lives. And I see the spraying problem that we're addressing as the same way. Actually, we have to call it geoengineering in order to communicate with people that know it as that, especially in the academic realm. But for myself, I really don't like euphemisms or not calling things what they really are. And what's going on here is just there are planes flying almost all over the world right now, dumping toxic metals and other things in the recipe right on the heads of the people. And I really don't like to dignify it with the term of any kind of engineering, because I still have some respect for engineers, the real ones, and this is just air raids and assaults on our health and the biosphere as a whole. So, but when we have to communicate with people in an academic realm or ones that call it some kind of engineering, we can use those terms. And it's even been called persistent contrails, which is a complete oxymoron, because as my understanding anyway, contrails do not persist. So this is something else. We're being attacked, and we're trying to let people be aware of it, spread that awareness out, and then part two is, all right, what do you do about it? It doesn't really help to be aware unless you can respond in a constructive way, both to attempt to stop the whole program, which is a huge worldwide intergovernmental global project launched against us, and the other thing is what you can do to protect your own personal health and well-being and that of your family while the spraying is still going on, such as right now. So with the idea that geoengineering, chemtrails, the spray programs, these are all connected to everything else, to me it's a symptom, and again I come from a health analogy, but this is a symptom of a health problem. And it's not the health problem itself. But when I look at what is the health problem for this patient, which is the world and humanity, with the spraying being the symptom, the health problem to me is that we have a very small group of very malicious, criminally insane people at the top of a power structure directing and funding and arranging and covering for programs like geoengineering, like the GMO seeds infecting and contaminating the entire food supply, like fluoride and other poisons being put into the drinking water, which is almost impossible to comprehend that something like that would actually be happening, like poisons being used directly on the food supply other than GMOs, and so many other things like that, and like the real technologies that we know are available, clean energy, free energy sources that have been available for a long time, and the inventors and the promoters of these technologies are either killed or paid to be silent. So those are all symptoms of the same problem. And to me, that problem has to be addressed at the root while we work on the symptoms as well. And that requires as much awareness, developed consciousness on the part of the population as possible. Because the more we have that, the less we'll be distracted fighting against each other and arguing over insignificant details, and the more we'll focus together in a unified manner to take back the integrity of the planet. So I want to look at some of the issues that have come up during the week that are related to all this, and also I was going to invite Russ to just give us a review of anything interesting happening in the Facebook group that's getting very huge on his Facebook page, and let us know what kind of discussion and what kind of activity and points of view are coming out on that. So if you would like to say a little bit about that, Russ, it would be interesting.
Hi, Richard. Sure. Good to have everyone on. Today we are working on building our Facebook group. We're up to 19,692 members right now. We have over 500 members in the past 7 days. So this group is growing very, very quickly. So if anybody wants to check out the world's largest geoengineering related Facebook group, go to facebook.com/groups/Global Skywatch, or you can just search Facebook for Global Skywatch, or Chemtrails Global Skywatch is the official name of the group. We've got very rapid growth. We've got a lot of people interested in this subject, a lot of new people. I hear from new people all the time. One of the primary interests that people have in this is how it is affecting their health, as you would probably very well imagine. So many people are sick today, and people just accept all of these illnesses as getting old or just a side effect of pollution or something like that. When I reject that, I think Richard does as well, that these illnesses are, there virtually should be no illness in the world today. With the technology we have and the knowledge we have of hygiene and other basic subjects that keep us healthy and nutrition, there should be virtually no illness in the world today, but it is all being induced because of intentionally induced ignorance and intentionally induced pollution, like geoengineering spraying that's going on over our heads. So I do invite, I'm looking through our group wall right now. I see pictures that I captured off of the DVD of an animated film called Over the Hedge. It's amazing because I actually captured these back in 2006, and I posted them on our Orbis Vitae forum. And these pictures have now made their way into videos, made their ways into video graphics and memes all over. In fact, I was watching a lecture from Dane a few weeks ago, and he's using some of those screen captures that I captured in 2006, and I don't even think he knows I captured them. So it's nice to see all those images getting around. And the reason that's so significant is in the animated film Over the Hedge was the first animated film that I saw these plumes, the jet plumes, which are introduced into the background. They're actually animated into about 2/3 to 3/4 of the animation of the entire movie. These are put into the background. They're kind of subtle. And so I captured these right off the DVD because I was astonished, because I recognized this as conditioning. This is called normalization. In other words, they want to make people desensitized to the idea of these lines in the sky and make everybody feel that they're normal. And especially children. The more that they can make children feel they're normal, then as children grow up, they won't oppose them. And it's just like dental amalgam. It's just like vaccines. These things that are put in our teeth, for instance, that are supposedly helping our health, are the very things that are off-gassing mercury, making us sick 24 hours a day. And we never suspect them, although they're right in front of our faces, almost quite literally. And same thing with vaccines. Here we are to help you with your health, yet we've got aluminum and formaldehyde and mercury and other very, very harmful things in here. And it's right in front of us. And that's how the truth often is. It's right in front of us. It's just hidden in plain sight because we're not able to see it because of conditioning. And this is what that movie Over the Hedge was, the first anime movie I saw that used this type of conditioning. The second movie, I also see a screen capture on the group here, is from the movie Cars, which was a very, very famous animated movie, which now has a franchise of, I guess, 2 or 3 sequels. And they have actually car treads in the sky, which is kind of a figurative simile for the idea of chemical aerosols or chemtrails. So you come to our Facebook group. There's all kinds of great information. Please, if you want people to learn about this subject and you want them to feel like they're not alone, then let them come to a group that will soon have 20,000 members that's supporting this issue with good information and a lot of people who are helping each other, even with the health aspect of it as well. So that's what's going on there in the Global Skywatch Facebook group.
That's good. Yeah, I'd really encourage everybody to join that group, and I am hoping that the group will become more and more action-oriented in terms of even just things like making phone calls, sending emails. And I talked to Dane this week, and he's really interested in developing on the disinformation news site that's up now. And Russ, you might want to introduce that to people. But one of the things that it's planned to have, according to Dane, is contact information for things like TV stations that talk about weather and any kind of site that's giving out geoengineering information or information that it doesn't exist, so that people can call in and say, oh, by the way, it does exist, and, why are you giving out this information? And along that line, this week I called National Weather Service in Arizona, where I am, and the reason I did that, I was just getting particularly irritated one day because the spraying is just getting heavier and heavier, and it's just amazing to me that most of the people seem to have no idea that it's even happening right in front of their eyes. It's a real tribute to the quality of sophistication of programming that we've all been put through, the course of brainwashing. It's really worked well on an awful lot of people. So I called up the National Weather Service. I looked on the computer and found a phone number, not for the main office in Maryland, which I couldn't find a number for, but for the one in Arizona. And I called him up, and I got a human being answering right away. Actually, very nice guy as far as I could tell, and I think very sincere. And I did not take a confrontational attitude. I think that's really important unless you're dealing with people that are already in that mindset. Most of the people in the system, not just for weather related issues, but in the whole vast government system that has come to dominate American society and most of our lives, most of the people in there are just there for a job, and most of them believe, I think, that they're serving their country. They're not bad people. They're just really misinformed and very ignorant of what's going on. So anyway, had a very nice conversation with him, and I told him that I was a health scientist, which I am, and that air quality was a very important component of health. And I was concerned because I had evidence that there was massive amounts of spraying going on at high altitudes over our heads, toxic metals and other ingredients there. And I had noticed a very strange correlation between the days of the heavy spraying and the weather forecast that said partly cloudy on those days on a day that would normally be clear. In other words, there were no clouds in the sky, but for those of us that watched the trails spread out, the trails became the cloud cover, the fake cloud cover. And he was literally completely unaware of it, right in the middle of the system. And he really did not know what I was talking about, and explained to me how he put the forecast together using the computers in certain ways. And he thought it was very interesting. He was totally open to it, said he knew nothing about it. And I thought it was also fascinating that he said, well, if this is true, at the end of about a half-hour discussion, he said, if this is really true, then yes, it's very important, and you should write an article for one of the main journals and get it exposed. And I said, you don't get these things in the journals primarily. I've talked to many journal owners. That's about as likely as they're running a story that chemotherapy is now unnecessary. It's not going to happen. And that's because there's vast money and power interests that want to keep things the way they are. And since they control science now, for the most part, the main journals only write articles favorable to the drug business and to radiation and chemotherapy and to the fact that geoengineering is either not happening or may happen for our benefit to save the planet. So you can't do it, as far as I know, through putting information in the journals. And the way that we left the conversation was just that we would continue looking for ways to get massive exposure for these things when the main channels of communication are not open to us. So I found that to be a really interesting conversation. And this man right in the middle of the National Weather Service putting out false information on weather forecasts is part of a massively coordinated conspiracy, and he doesn't even know it. And I just found that really fascinating. So
Compartmentalization.
Yeah, it is exactly. It's compartmentalization, and it's happening in so many different related fields. So, we have to keep working on ways to get to the root of this thing. And I think one way that really needs to be looked into more is the potential root of using common law, not against people who have no idea what they're doing, but against the ones that do know what they're doing and are setting all this into motion above the compartments. And those are very high levels in or above the government. And there are some signs that this is actually being used successfully in other issues that I've been following through a group called itccs.org. Very inspirational work that they're doing right now. So.
I want to let people know that the disinformation directory you spoke about a minute ago is already up and active. And
yeah.
People are welcome to join and post information about people who are in the public eye who are actively spreading disinformation. They can participate in that. And I also wanted to ask if we should try to pull Dane back in.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, the only reason for everybody to know that Dane's not with us right now is that we couldn't reach him for some reason right before the show. And he may be driving or held up somewhere. But yeah, Russ, if you continue trying to reach him, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to disconnect from the station momentarily, so you're going to have a little bit of silence here just so his phone number doesn't get transmitted, and we'll be right back. So hold on for just a second while I try to pull Dane in. Here we go. Okay, we're back. Trying to get Dane in on the conversation. We think he got held up somewhere. We're unable to reach him, so Richard and I are going to be with you today. Richard, did you want to talk about the other situation?
Yeah, before I get to the Bundy situation and how it's connected to the whole geoengineering issue, I also want to mention to people that before we get this program stopped, this chemtrail spraying program, until we get that resolved, there are definitely very important things that each individual can do for yourself and your family to lessen the impact of the poisonous materials that are falling down in the air every day. And, if people are interested, I think we can start spending some time on that. It definitely makes a huge difference of other aspects of your lifestyle, what you're eating and drinking, cosmetics that you're using, whether you know about how to use grounding techniques for your own body, which is incredibly important. The use of sunlight. Sun is, in my opinion now, I can't tell anybody else what to do about any of this stuff because we're not living in a free communication society anymore, especially about health. But I can tell you from my point of view and what I'm continuing to discover on my own is that sunlight is not a cause of any bad conditions whatsoever unless you just stay out too long in it and get burned. But I've found no connection whatsoever with skin cancer and things like that. I think so much of the disinformation that we were just talking about goes way beyond the areas we may be aware of, and it covers vast amounts of what we consider to be true, and we do some investigation and find out that the opposite is the case. So the reality, in my opinion, is that you can do a lot of things to radically lessen the health impact so that you have little or no immediate effect from the poisons that are falling on you as far as your functioning day to day, which to me is really important because we don't want to be lying around sick if we don't have to. And even in a bad environment, you have a lot of control over whether that happens to you or not. So we can go into that if people are interested. The other thing is what I was going to mention on the Bundy situation. This was not covered, not accurately anyway, on mainstream news. And I don't remember exactly what date most of it happened. I think it was about a week ago that BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is one of many agencies that the totally out of control federal government, which I believe is complicit and behind a lot of the chemtrails happening in this country. Of course, it has to be with their permission. Otherwise, they'd all be shot down immediately. They have managed to exert a lot of control over our lives through agencies that just make their own laws and then enforce them without Congress, without any due process, without anything like that. So obviously they're totally unconstitutional and illegal. They have no business existing. One of those is the Bureau of Land Management, and there are many others. There are too many to list right now. But people need to realize that the importance of the Constitution in America, one of the main important points is that it limits the federal government, and it limits it to very, very specific areas beyond which it's illegal for the federal government to act. And those are called the enumerated powers. There are a list of them in the Constitution. There are not very many of them. And it specifically says that anything not in that list is off limits for the federal government. So ignoring that completely, the federal government has set up what it calls agencies, Bureau of Land Management, various departments, Department of Education, Agriculture, other things that are not in the enumerated powers. So they're not legal for the government to be involved in. And yet they just do it anyway, and they make what's called policies. And those policies they enforce at the point of a gun. And Bureau of Land Management is one of those that has no business existing, in my opinion. And one of their main functions is to acquire vast tracts of real estate in America and own them in the name of the agency of the federal government. Completely illegal again, and there's a clause in the Constitution that outlines what real estate the U.S. government is allowed to have, which is, I think, 10 miles square, called Washington, D.C., and certain small areas for forts and armories and things like that. That's about it, except for possessions outside of the U.S. that it may have. But other than that, it can't own real estate in this country. And totally ignoring that, it's gone out and just taken more. I think it's more than half of all the real estate, all the land in America now that supposedly belongs to the federal government, but it can't because that's constitutionally prohibited. So anyway, the Bureau of Land Management is like the landlord over that land and starts charging rent to people to either graze their cattle on it or use it for other things temporarily, and in that way determines what can be done with the land, and then they use a lot of it to make deals for various aspects of the government itself and to make profit and accomplish other goals that they may have. So this is happening in Nevada, where apparently the federal government owns about 85% of the entire state of Nevada, all illegally, in my opinion, but that's what they say they own. So this family, this ranching family called the Bundys, moved in there, I believe, in the 1870s, before Nevada was a state, or I think before it was even a territory. And they had the grazing and surface and water rights to a big area of desert land sufficient to keep their cattle alive. And they've been running them on that land ever since, through generations of their family. in the meantime, the federal government comes in, claims ownership of this land. BLM starts dictating what can and cannot be done with it and charging fees even to people that had been there long before BLM had even started. And they had made more and more and more regulations to get rid of the ranchers using the land there. And it turns out that they were doing this because they have a big project in mind, which is actually spearheaded by the Nevada Senator Harry Reid, in order to make a big deal and a lot of money and power for the government. So the Bundys were the last holdout of the ranch, and the BLM was telling them to pay fees to stay there, called grazing fees, and they said, no, you don't have any jurisdiction here. You shouldn't even be here. This is the state of Nevada, and your agency is illegal. So they didn't really like that, and they decided instead of putting a lien against the Bundy property, which you would do to somebody that owed you money that you wanted to eventually collect, they just sent in armed forces instead in the name of the Bureau of Land Management. And almost all these agencies are getting their own armed forces now in preparation for something large that's getting ready to happen in America that's going to take them a lot of armaments, according to them. Anyway, so they started harassing and beating up various people using various thug tactics like a mafia, and the Bundys were not leaving. They got a lot of community support, and it eventually came to a showdown. The BLM had started stealing their cattle, had shot a number of them, and the BLM set up a barricade. They set up a free speech area about 3 miles away where people could go and say anything they wanted. And of course, this is not something you do in America. We're supposed to have free speech everywhere in this country, as long as we're not actively hurting someone else or taking their rights. And eventually the Bundys, with the community support that they had, without the help of their sheriff, whose job should have been to defend them against federal agencies, including BLM, because within the county, the sheriff has a higher authority than any federal agent. The sheriff, if they know their job, can kick out or arrest agencies, any agency operatives of the federal government, IRS, BLM, anybody like that. The sheriff said no, they weren't going to help them at all. So the Bundys and the community came out, and the BLM was behind the barricade aiming machine guns at the crowd and saying through bullhorns, we're going to shoot you. We're going to shoot all of you, and we're legally authorized to do this. And the crowd, without doing anything violent or aggressive, just walked right up to the barricade, including a few really brave reporters, right up to the guns, and took the barricade down, walked out, and took their cattle back from where they were put in pens. And the BLM people left. One of the reasons they left, I think, and didn't shoot everybody, was that right before that standoff, Harry Reid had been exposed in being behind the money deal that was waiting to be made as soon as they got rid of the Bundys. And it would have been really bad publicity for him to be behind one of the biggest slaughters in American history. So the BLM backed down, the mainstream media took over, spinning the story that this crazy old guy that refused to pay his fair share to land that the government owned was causing all this trouble, and BLM had mercifully not pressed the matter and had backed down. But that's not the issue at all. This was one of the most important moments in current American history, and it demonstrates what can be done when somebody is in the right and they have the support of all the people around them in the community. Big changes can happen. So with more education, more awareness of what's going on, using channels like Russ's Facebook page and the 2 GeoEngineering sites that we have and others, people can become aware of these things, and the numbers can grow even without any help from the mainstream media. So I thought this was incredibly important, inspirational, and extremely relevant to the geoengineering issue.
And what kind of coverage does that get on mainstream media?
Mainstream media is saying that this is just somebody who is not paying their fair share of taxes, that they think they're above the law, that they don't respect their government masters, and that the BLM, who has all the rights and the citizens have none, is being very merciful and not doing anything to them yet.
And
That's the
nothing about,
mainstream coverage.
and they didn't talk anything about the Harry Reid profit deal, right?
No, they'd rather not discuss that right now. And the only thing is Harry Reid is appearing publicly and saying this is not over. We can't afford to have American citizens just disobey a law and walk away from it, which is quite ironic because virtually everybody in the higher positions in the federal government is breaking laws every day, and they don't even have to walk away. They're just not held accountable. So, but he's saying that it's the American citizens that we have to keep under control. So that's it. That's his main point.
Okay, probably a good time to invite people to call in if they want to chat with us. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. Give the number.
Yeah, if you'd like to call, we do have 30 minutes left in the show. We'd love to hear from you. The call-in number is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296.
Yeah, great. It'd be nice to hear from some of you guys. The other thing I want to mention with respect to my discussion with the National Weather Service this week is that remember, most of the people in these agencies, most of the people working in the power structure are really good people. They're very sincere, and they really don't know the implications of what they're doing and who they're working for. They're trying to feed their families and trying to do a good job at their whatever their employment is. The weather service man I talked to was a high-level forecaster, and he, as far as I'm concerned, he really didn't understand anything about the correlation between the weather forecast covering for the chemtrail spraying every day, and it's amazing. I noticed that a week in advance or more, AOL, which I have on the computer, is giving out weather forecasts, and in northern Arizona, it used to be known for 300 days a year of beautiful, clear weather. And we still have that behind the chemtrails, but you can't tell because most of the days, I'd say 60 to 80% of the clear days turn out to be completely obscured sky that you can't even see. And on those days, even out in long-term forecasts, whoever is originating the forecasts understand the spray schedules because they'll forecast the days to be partly cloudy, and then they'll know in advance what days there's no spraying at all, and they'll forecast clear, and there are no trails. So I found that incredibly interesting. I wonder if other people have noticed that type of thing in other areas of the country. I don't know if you've noticed that at all where you are, Russ, but it's certainly going on here.
Yeah, I've noticed that we have a disproportionate number of weekend days that are clear. I haven't done the math. I just haven't done it. I haven't taken the time, but just in my observations, it's amazing how often Saturday and or Sunday, and this is not every Saturday or Sunday, but how often it's clear compared to the rest of the week. And I think that's because they count on people being indoors and not seeing the sky. So during the week, there's a much smaller number of people that will be able to view all the trails. And part of the strategy has been to keep the number of people who are aware of this to a minimum. And one of the strategies, another strategy they use, of course, is I've seen two instances when I lived in Jamestown, New York, and I moved to Bangor, Maine, where they have changed the spraying, the trails from long persistent trails every single day to short non-persistent trails, and then starting to fly at higher altitudes.
Yeah, weren't you saying that the low bypass turbofans don't give off any trails at all now? And so if we see even short ones, that means that they're chemtrails.
Anybody with any age on them at all who's watched the sky will know that they've never seen a trail come out of a jet engine, except maybe in very rare circumstances, because there is a type of jet engine that, like the SPAY 512 series, which does produce a little tiny bit of a trail because it uses water injection. The catch is there's only about 50 of those in service, and they're practically all in the UK on the BAC 111s, which are not very popular. Most of those are out of commission these days. So high bypass turbofans, which are the type of engine that's used on every jet today, every large jet in the world, whether they're military or civilian, do not produce trails, period. They don't produce trails. The vast majority, the way you picture, for people who don't know, the way you should picture a jet engine is it's really a prop plane. Don't be misled by the fact that there's a big circle around it and it looks real futuristic. That's called a ducted turbofan. And the word ducted means that the fan, which is the propeller essentially, is in a duct, which means it's just in that circular encasing, because that dramatically increases the efficiency of the fan. So it's a propeller, essentially. It's a fan inside a casing, a duct. And the vast majority of the air that goes through that engine does not get combusted. It's just air being pushed by a prop. This is why people who have any age on them and who have watched the sky like me have never, ever seen a trail come out of a jet engine ever. If I had ever, since my childhood, I lived in near Washington, D.C. when I was younger. I grew up in Tampa Bay. Those are two of the most busy airspaces on the planet. I watched the sky constantly. I've probably seen, 10,000, or I've done the math just to try to get an idea, but just thousands upon thousands of jets in the sky. Used to fly every year. Never have I ever seen a trail come out of a jet engine. And the reason is because they don't produce trails. And what the disinformants try to do is they tell you, if you combust a fossil fuel, it produces a lot of water, and they give these nice fancy sounding formulas. The problem is that's just not true in practical application. There's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere. The primary component of our atmosphere is not oxygen. That is not the majority of our atmosphere, but that doesn't even matter. If you go to an airport and you watch the jets take off, what you will see is a little black soot, and that is the residue that's left over from burning, an efficient burning of kerosene. A little bit of a black soot. That's what you will see. Now, when you are taking off, you have your engines at their highest setting, the highest thrust. You're burning the maximum amount of fuel for the distance traveled. So where is all this water? If all of this fuel is being turned into water, where is it? Where is all the blast of clouds that should be produced in the airport? It would be so thick, based on the trails we see in the sky, it'd be so thick that jets wouldn't be able to take off. They'd have to wait till the clouds clear, these massive plumes clear. But we don't see that. Why? Because these fan engines do not produce trails. And the water that is produced in the exhaust is so small that it is not visible, which is when they get to altitude, they throttle back significantly. And so they're running more efficiently at altitude than they are when they're taking off. When they're taking off, they're using the highest thrust. They're using a lot of fuel in proportion to the distance being traveled. They're usually on a steep incline when they're gaining altitude. If they really did produce trails, that is the time the plumes would be the greatest and leaving the largest visible plume. But you don't see a plume because they don't produce plumes. We're being lied to. And most of the lies, Richard, throughout history, this is one thing I've learned because I've studied corruption for a large portion of my life now, and how this works, is that the lies that they tell are so blatant that people have trouble believing their lies. They're so blatant, and people think, if it was a lie, it would be more sophisticated than that. That's actually part of the mechanism of making a lie believable, is making it so stupid that people can't believe that would be the essence of the lie. And this is what we have with amalgam fillings that have mercury. They say, this is one thing I like to talk about because I was mercury poisoned. They say, when you put mercury into this mixture of tin and these other metals, it stays in the mixture and the mercury never comes out. Well, based on entropy, nothing is completely inert. Something will always come out. So why would you use the most toxic, non-radioactive metal on Earth in your mouth, which is one of the most volatile environments in the world? You wouldn't, and there's no excuse for it. You can't claim ignorance. No real scientist without an agenda or without a nice big bribe in his pocket would ever do something like that in people's mouths without knowing and verifying. And it's very easy to verify that the mercury comes off of the fillings, and it's been done with phosphorescent screens that actually absorb that wavelength of light. And there's a smoking tooth video, you can look it up on YouTube, where you can do a very easy experiment and you can actually see the vapor that comes off 24/7 off those fillings. Well, the lie is so big and so plain. People say just like I've had friends actually say this to me, that why would they do that? If that was really dangerous, then the government would never do anything like that, and people would know about it. And the amazing thing that the public is finally realizing is the public doesn't know about it. The lies are so bad and they're so blatant that people can't believe they're really lies. And so this is what holds true with these trails, is that we have textbooks now teaching children that the trails are condensation, harmless water vapor, and they're training the children up. And it's also hard for people to believe that the conspiracy is so widespread that all of these venues, like the weather, the news, and textbooks, can all work together, and even advertising agencies can all work together to condition and normalize this. But see, until you understand how connected this is and how long this has been going on and how well the elements that are involved in the cover-up are coordinated, until people understand how well coordinated they are, they just can't grasp that all of these things would work together, that all of these agencies and all of the news and the weather and the textbook makers would work together. But when you start drawing lines and you see who's involved, it's really a very small group of people, like you said earlier, and they tell lies that are so blatant, and they make up these silly stories. There were some stories one more thing I'll run by is off the California coast. There was a number of days or weeks where people were smelling sulfur. Now, sulfur is one of the primary chemtrail types, or one of the popular ones that is not used very much anymore. I smell and taste the chemtrails because I have a very sensitive taste and smell. And they blamed it. What the news did, and here, across huge areas, many cities off the coast of California, they were having people reporting a really potent sulfur smell. Well, the way they explained it away is they said, well, sometimes gases leak from sewer pipes that are in the ocean. There's some sewer pipes, and sometimes they leak a little bit, and that sewer smell can travel for miles. Well, that's funny that it happened only during this block of time, and it covered a huge area encompassing different cities. But that was the cover story. It's a horrible cover story. It's an absolutely horrible cover story. It's so horrible that people can't believe that they would be that bad at lying and get away with it. But that's how bad it is. And so people need to take responsibility, start thinking for yourselves, draw your own conclusions. Don't let other people or news agencies draw your conclusions for you. One thing I've talked about before is I was working for a small political party years ago, and this is when my eyes began to be open, is this political party would have people who were present at rallies and at demonstrations. And whenever it was a demonstration that the government did not like, they would cut the numbers down to 20 or 10% of the actual number of people that were at the rally. So, for instance, if there were 5,000 people at the rally, they would report 500. They always marginalized and minimalized the showing because they want people to think it's just some little fringe group. And in fact, they did this every single time there was a rally or a public gathering. They skewed the numbers dramatically. And this is when I started realizing how prevalent the lying is. And then I went into the herbal research industry and started researching the science behind herbs. And what I found is that these studies were actually being lied about on the nightly news. Blatantly lied about. Here's what it says. No, that's not what it says. Do you read the study? Find out what it really says. Because they lie to you. Because nobody reads the studies. They just watch the news and they take for granted, thinking that the news would never get away with it. They assume they're telling the truth. So it's absolutely astonishing how bad these lies are and how easy they are to find if people are willing just to do a little bit of work.
Yeah, I think another thing is that people have to be very careful of language, because language is used all the time for deception, especially to the public. And they're trained to have a certain reaction when we're told a certain phrase. For example, the phrase conspiracy theory. The message that you're supposed to hear from that is turn off thinking, don't consider this anymore. It's something that is so ridiculous that you shouldn't even give it any thought. And so people get turned off to their regular analytical approach to things, and they just say, well, it's a conspiracy theory, so it must be false. But when you think about what a conspiracy is, it just means people cooperating, working together for a certain aim. And usually in conspiracy, that's some kind of a negative, destructive type aim. But to think that people would not cooperate for these things just makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, we're supposed to think that, yeah, bank robbers might conspire to rob a bank or something, but nobody else would ever cooperate for that kind of an aim, and certainly no really negative, bad people in government would ever conspire. They'd just be totally disconnected from each other. And that's not the case. Modern communications technology, it's really easy for people within huge corporations and within government entities to cooperate all the time for the sake of furthering their mutual goals. So there's nothing unusual about conspiracy at all. The whole negative taste that we've got for that is just programming, being told over and over and over again that these words are things to be made fun of, that people are just crazy to imagine these things. It's completely not logical. So, in fact, to have these huge interests not cooperating would mean that they're not smart enough to figure out how they could push their interests much easier. And that's not the case.
Yeah, another aspect of it, too, is when I was working for the small political party years ago, we had meetings. And these meetings were incredible lectures by very, very intelligent men that exposed government corruption. And what I found very quickly is that people who went to one meeting never came back to the second meeting. And I quickly stopped having them because I ran out of friends to come to these meetings. And I went to some of my friends who I'd asked to come and who came to one meeting and never came back. And I said, no judgment, but what is wrong? What are we doing wrong? Why didn't you come back? And you know what I found out? They said it was too scary. And what's very interesting is this is what mainstream media does to keep people from even looking into the corruption, is they do this. They marginalize those who are courageous enough to look into them by creating social pressure for those who are not courageous enough by calling them paranoid conspiracy theorists. And what this does is it keeps those people who haven't looked into this yet from even exploring the possibility. And the way that it does this is because it creates social pressure. Who wants to be associated with somebody who's paranoid? Therefore, by marginalizing these people and calling them paranoid, other people don't even want to be associated with conspiracies and don't want to publicly admit that they maybe have looked privately and learned that some of this stuff really is true, or a lot of it's true, and a lot of this corruption is really true. So it marginalizes and divides people based on their own fear of rejection of their peers. And here's the great irony of this whole thing. It is the independent thinking, common sense, strong-willed, courageous person that comes to an understanding of the scope and depth of the corruption and conspiracies today. And it is the fearful person who ends up not looking at these things because they're afraid of what other people will think, or they're afraid of knowing things that scare them. So it is not paranoid conspiracy theorists. It's paranoia that causes ignorance.
Yeah, I've noticed this is one of the reasons that it was so important to the federal government to get control over education, and that it's being pushed further now with the unified Common Core approach and things like that, is that if you can control the mindset of the kids starting out, when they're 5 years old or 3 years old and all the way through upper level graduate school, and just really push the insecurity and the fear issues, then this makes a perfect population if you want to control people without any resistance. And that's what's been accomplished, unfortunately. So we need to encourage each other to bring back and remember the old values of courage and individual commitment to finding out what's true no matter what it is, and not just want to stay blind and asleep because it's too scary to wake up. And I think that's why drugs are so popular. It's because it's much easier than having to deal with the reality happening around you in the outside world. But you can't do anything to improve things unless you make a commitment, first of all, that you're dropping fear. It's a completely voluntary thing. We don't have to have it. No matter what's done or what's happening, we have the power to decide whether we have any fear or not. I didn't know that for a long time until I met certain people that had already done that and demonstrated for me that fear is not required, no matter what's happening. And if we decide to drop it, then our mind gets clear and we can decide what we want to do in response to what's around us.
And what's interesting, Richard, is the saying, land of the free, home of the brave. And people don't understand how profound that statement is, because the truth is, when courage disappears, freedom soon follows. You cannot have freedom without courage. It takes courage.
Yeah, exactly right. I think it's necessary to make a commitment inside ourselves that we really do want to know what's real and what's true, even if no one else agrees with us. You know, it's so easy to take the lazy way and just make the priority being an accepted member of a group. And that's how people start becoming obedient servants of government, is exactly the same reason. They've got total, authorization, and recognition that everything they do is right. And it's much more important for our own development as individual human beings to decide we want to learn, what's really happening. Learn as much about yourself as you possibly can. Keep yourself in really good condition to the absolute maximum that you can learn how to do, even if nobody else is doing it. And the rewards that come to that in terms of mental clarity and a feeling of strength and empowerment and stability are worth anything that you have to go through.
Yeah, it's amazing the power that individual people have. If you go out, it's amazing also how many people know nothing about, like you said earlier, Richard, know nothing about this. I've gone out and talked to people cold, like at Home Depot. Somebody might be loading a truck. Somebody might be out there. And I'll say, hey, have you heard of geoengineering? Have you heard of... People have not heard about this. And the thing is that when we tell people about it, a certain percentage of people will believe it. They will quickly latch on and understand and go, yeah, I'm starting to look up and I see this. So we all just need to understand the power of our words when we get out there and we tell people a certain number of people are going to respond, a certain percentage of people are going to respond. And that should make us feel good, but we have to go do it. It's very important.
And that takes a little bit of personal courage too, because I know that people that I've told about the chemtrails and what appear to be clouds in the sky that are not clouds, and you can watch them forming and that sort of thing. Some of the people that I have mentioned that to, not accosting them just out of nowhere, but already in discussions of various other things, some of them have just laughed at me and walked away. And other ones, they've never dropped it and have gotten very involved and are now looking at what they can individually do, not just in that area, but in all the others, to try to make things better, for future generations. It's worth it, even if you have to get laughed at by a certain proportion of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we have, with social media, we have the ability, and with email lists, with emailing itself, we have the ability to contact people in a way we never have before. So people have tremendous amount of power beyond just people that they see face to face every day. But we have to be willing to go beyond our fear. And this is one thing that I like to say to people, because some people go out and they say, I don't care what people think. Other people are very, very paranoid of what people think. And I think we should have a balanced view. I think it is important to care what people think, but it's important not to be afraid of what people think.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, harmony is certainly a desirable outcome. And if people are antagonistic toward each other, it makes it really hard to do anything cooperatively. So it's important in that sense what people think. But some of them are just going to argue and disagree and denigrate what you say no matter what you say. So you have to not worry too much about that. And in that sense, you don't want to be worried about what people think. But I think it's important to approach people with a positive and cooperative point of view and respectful, not argumentative, because a lot of times you'll get back the exact attitude that you give. And if you have great respect, even for people within the system that may be doing things that are destructive, that you understand that they don't, that could be you. That could be us. And we should never have the arrogance to think that, oh, we're just a lot smarter and better person and these idiots are all in the power structure and they're the problem. No, that could be us. And we have a special privilege not to be in that foggy state of mind and we have something to share, and it just needs to be done with respect for everybody, in my opinion.
Right, yeah, exactly. And Dan on the chat room, I'm trying to read while I'm thinking at the same time here. Tough to do sometimes, especially with the air the way it is. I got a nice, gentle, throbbing headache from the air today. It really affects me horribly, which is why I'm in this movement, because I can smell and taste it, and it affects me. But Dan is talking about how the world's become complex, and computers can be hard to learn for some people. Taxes are complex. The world is too complex in general. I think that's a very good point, and it kind of gives people, they don't even try to comprehend things anymore, he says. This is a big reason why they don't pay attention to this stuff. I think it is overwhelming. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of babble all over. And they try to drown that's one of the tactics that they use is to try to drown out the truth with noise and making things complex. I think that's a good point. But not only making things too complex, but also making people less intelligent and able to comprehend complex things. Hence, we have fluoride, we have chemtrails, aluminum, we have vaccines, we have aspartame, we have all of these other poisons. I do tech support and I love my customers, but what I found over the last several years is that people have more and more trouble following more than one direction at a time. And there are times when I'm giving computer tech support that I literally, and this is very common, I have to repeat my instruction 2 or 3 times before somebody will get it. And I've just seen a real decline in people's comprehension, and I feel like with all the toxicity we're enduring, this is a big part of it. We have a caller. Caller, how are you today?
Oh, hi. I am fantastic. This is Christina Maria in New Orleans calling. And as I was listening to your radio show, just got a phone call because I have just signed myself up for a Hands Across the Sand event, which is taking place on May 17th. It's all about clean water, saying no to dirty fuels, and we want yes to clean energy. However, their list of causes at this time does not include geoengineering or SRM or SAG. And the gentleman who called me, because they have just joined with the Action Network and the Tar Sands Coalition, and they wanted to make sure I got that information so that I could sign up for that event and coordinate that. And I asked him, I mentioned geoengineering, solar radiation management, and stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. He had no idea. And I am positive that if the people involved with this Hands Across the Sand event are aware of what this is doing to not just our water and our bodies and our soils, but how it is contaminating our waters globally, I'm sure that they would want to include this as one of their causes.
That's a very good point. Would you have any contact information or anything you'd like to share where people could encourage these people to do that?
Oh, wow. I just got off of the phone with them and I went back in. Hands Across the Sand. It can Google it. It can look up, is the event. I coordinated one 4 years ago. This was amidst the BP oil spill. I happened to be in Northern California in Humboldt County. I'm not an activist. I'm an artist. I am becoming an artistically aware environmental salvationist at this time because I have no choice. And I signed up this past week. There's a map on the Hands Across the Sand website. And 4 years ago, every state participated, and it also went global. And the point of it is you gather at noon, your time zone, people hold hands in solidarity for 15 minutes of silence to focus on clean energies. And it has been proven through research that people's mood and their energy, if you have bad negative energy near a water's edge, the water becomes murky. If you're positive, the water becomes vibrant and more lively.
Well, thank you for calling. I appreciate that. We're out of time right now. This is Engineering Watch Radio. Join